Check, 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 check. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is AVC 185, 3D Modeling in Animation 1. So this is spring 2026. Everybody's here for this class, right? Let's talk about a few things. One, we're already short a day because of Monday being off, and so today might be a little faster and higher density than I typically like to operate at. But we're up against it in the first week, and we want to get started on some stuff. So we're going to do that. I am Casey Farina, your instructor for this class. Because we were missing Monday, I did a version of a lot of the syllabus introduction and orientation, and that is over here on the home page of the class. And you should watch and take notes on that for those of you who have not already. The theme for the day, take notes. I encourage you to do this by hand, the old-fashioned way, because you'll remember things better. And I have a bunch of data to support that, and we'll look at that later during the semester. So keep that in mind. One of the things you'll definitely need for this class is a notebook. I would encourage you to have the notebook out starting now. And keep a lot of, I'm going to give an abbreviated version of the nuts and bolts of the class here, which is different than a lot of other classes for reasons that we'll get into here. But this video has the longer version of that, and we'll look at some of the syllabus right now over here. In fact, let me switch this to how you guys see Canvas. There we go. Everything, the way I set things up in Canvas is going to be over here in modules. Everything appears there under the coursework module. So I try to keep the Canvas orientation fairly simple. If we look over here, Syllabus Plus doesn't like that. Syllabus Plus is new. Not in love with Syllabus Plus. Seems like kind of a minus because I can't look at the syllabus. There we go. We'll do it this way. Okay, well that's loading up. Some quicker versions of this. So I teach, I'm residential faculty in digital media arts program in the art and humanities department. I've been here for somewhere over 15 years at this point. And I usually teach 3 to 4 classes a semester. This semester I'm teaching AVC 185, which is this class, 3D modeling for animation. AVC 200, which is animation and interactivity, where we focus on video game development, and then AVC 287, which is character animation. My schedule is such that I'm here, all day for the long haul on Mondays and Wednesdays from morning till evening, and then available other times beyond that. So the thing that's different about this class is our format here. On the schedule, it says that this class is, you only get to list one modality on the schedule, and this one is listed as in-person. However, what we're doing here is called multiple attendance options. And this class happens now in this room every Monday and Wednesday from 8:30 to 11:10. And I am broadcasting live to YouTube. Everything goes up on the my school YouTube channel, and it also gets archived there. And so this allows the class to be, you can participate either live in person or live online or asynchronously online. And this is up to you. I'm not monitoring your attendance in like a checkbox sort of way. This is on you. However, let me now really lay into this. The class is dense. You know, I've been doing this for a while now. I've never had a student come up and say like, wow, this is a pretty easy class, ever. I've had a lot of students come up and say this was a lot of work, but I learned a lot, so I'll take it. So it's especially at the beginning here, things will be very dense. I'm in here talking to you, lecturing, introducing these topics for the better part of 2.5 hours twice a week. And the best way to experience that, far and away, is in person. If you can be here in person, not only does that give you the best experience, it will give you the best retention. It will allow you to meet and establish relationships with me and your other classmates, right? People who you want to be working with at some point. If that's the best way to experience the class. If you're not feeling well, or for some reason you can't be here in person, I recommend being live online. The YouTube stream, for the most part, stays in sync, and you can, I have the chat open so I can see what's happening there, and people can interact with me over there and ask questions and, you know, still participate in the class. You're still on the schedule, right? This class is just, we'll get into this weekly cadence of turning things in, but just working on the class once a week is not going to be the best way to experience and internalize this information. So live online keeps you on the schedule and that you're parsing things out on Mondays and Wednesdays, and with us digitally, and then asynchronously align, meaning that as soon as it's, or even while it's happening, it's up there on YouTube, and then everything is there on the YouTube channel. And so here, under the live tab, this will start to fill up with all of the lectures for all of the classes over the entire course of the semester. They'll all be up there and indexed, which will be great. This sounds like kind of a hassle and overcomplicated. Why is that? Why does he even bother doing this? Why does he do it this way? It sounds complicated and it's not like the other classes. I do it this way for a couple reasons. I'm the only person that teaches these classes. There's not, you know, multiple sections of any of these classes. So in the interest of trying to make it as accessible as possible to as many students as possible, I've come up with this format that allows people to be here in person or be here virtually, or if you have to, time shift the class, right? But again, let me emphasize with many exclamation marks that if you can be here in person, now I realize this is the 8:30 class, but for those of you who that may be a challenge, I would allow me to throw down a gauntlet to be here at 8:30 Mondays and Wednesdays for the semester. I would think that would be a good opportunity to establish and prove to yourself that you can show up twice a week at said time. So please keep that in mind. Also, a word about the archiving of the lectures. This is a class. Like what we're doing right now, me talking, you guys participating. At the beginning here, especially today, it's going to be a lot of me talking as we try to get things rolling. But there'll be more back and forth as we go on throughout the semester. This is the class. Just because I use YouTube because it's really great for this purpose, but these, archiving everything that we're doing on YouTube does not make it, what is forwarded by the algorithm as a YouTube tutorial, right? These are not super fast paced. These are at the speed of education. So keep that in mind. So the big thing here is that we're committing to spending at least this amount of time every week on this topic, giving it our time and attention, ultimately the only things we have to give to anything. And if you're not willing to do that for this amount of time per week, this may not be the right fit for you here. So keep that in mind, because it has, what is interpreted by some as sort of a loosey-goosey attendance modality. You're like, oh, I can take it online. It's not like other online classes or some online classes that have sort of a checklist of things for you to go through at your own pace in Canvas. It's not the way I do it. In order to keep everyone together, as a class, learning as some sort of learning community. So keep that in mind. Even if you are participating asynchronously online, it's not going to be like other online. I'm not trashing other online modalities. It's just not what we're doing here with this. Again, because the institution has limited resources. It's not like there's multiple sections of this and we could have a totally separate online one that runs like some other online classes. All right, this is it, right? This is AVC 185 for Glendale Community College. So with that in mind, any questions about how this works? Yes?
Is there a link to the YouTube channel on the Canvas somewhere?
Yeah, it's right on the homepage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll be going there a lot. I would bookmark that. Yeah. Good question. What's your name?
Sean.
Sean. Good question, Sean. Anyone else? Questions about this? Yes.
If I'm online,
Uh-huh.
questions through the chat,
Mm-hmm.
is that what it is? Or in other words, I'm not gonna click on something and talk to you. I'll just type in my question.
Yeah, that's usually what we do. Occasionally we've done the other thing where if there's like some sort of like issue where it's not, the chat isn't cutting it, I've sent people a video link and then we'll do that during the thing. We've done that a handful of times. So, but mostly the chat, yeah. What's your name?
Kevin.
Kevin. Sean, Kevin. Anyone other questions? Yes.
For online, for live learning, is there like somewhere where we have to check in?
No. What was your name?
Heidi?
Heidi. Sean, Kevin, Heidi. Adrian and Adrian. We'll get to everyone's name here in a minute. Okay, so everyone's clear on this, right? And then also you can switch back and forth, right? Like things come up. If you don't feel well, right, that's also a great feature of doing things this way. Like if you're even a little squirrely, like please don't come here, right? And have everyone get infected with whatever it is that's going around, right? So this helps keep us all functional throughout the semester. Okay, so everyone's clear on this, right? Okay, and again, the big thing is the commitment to the time, right? And again, it's happening this way because I feel like this is a reasonable way to address limited institutional resources and what I think is a really pertinent issue in terms of educational availability, right? I want the class to be available to people who, for very serious work and or family reasons, can't be here at this time. But if you can be here at this time, again, let me say it again, be here at this time. Cool. All right. So that makes for a non-standard class setup. So how do we communicate with each other if we're not all in the same room at the same time? A bunch of different ways. We're going to use a lot of technology in this class. One of the technologies we use is Discord. Some of you may already be on the Digital Media Arts Discord browser, or the Discord channel server. The Discord server, and we have a channel on here. Our strategy for communicating here is Discord is this running conversation for everybody on the class that can happen at any time, and any question about artistic or technical course content, that conversation, I insist everyone funnel that to Discord, so that we have this standard place. You're going to ask a question, I can answer them there. You all can answer each other's questions. That probably happens more than me answering the questions there, which is great. You guys can talk to each other there. In general, I mean, everyone here, a lot of people probably already have a Discord channel or a Discord. You've used Discord, right? And so, yeah, this is me coming to you there in your hometown. Yes.
I'm probably jumping the gun, but I was just gonna ask if we need to make like a Discord account with our school email.
No, I'll get to that here in a second. I'll get to it. When to email me. Private information, okay? You're not feeling well, you have an emergency, you're gonna be out of town, something like that, then send me an email, okay? Any other question about like Blender, blah, 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 didn't blah, 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 that's Discord. What about this? Is this working as an artistic composition? That's Discord. I'm having a family emergency and I'm gonna be hard for me to keep up the next week, that's an email, okay? So that's how I try to, by siloing things like that, it helps me, try to keep up with all of the communication with all of the students. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, good. We'll go over Discord in some more detail here soon. So the work schedule here is already messed up because we missed Monday. So once we'll try to settle into this soon. Like I said, it's Monday and Wednesday, and Mondays it's very heavy on me lecturing, talking about how the new creative project is going to work, what features and what ideas and what strategies we're learning. And then we talk a little bit more about it on Wednesday. A lot of Wednesday is the critique and feedback on the previous week's project. And so this is another communication strategy with our disparate student body, some of you virtual, some of you live in person, is that in order for everyone to form some sort of community where not only do I know who you are, but hopefully you know each other, is a big part of every weekly creative project is you making a presentation video where you're talking about whatever it is that we made that week and how you made it and any problems that you had. And so I play those back in class on Wednesdays and sort of converse with the time shifted version of you. And so everybody, and that goes out on the broadcast. And so everybody gets to see everybody else, right? Even the people who are online and can never be here in person, we'll get to see them via the beauty of time shifted digital communication every Wednesday. That'll make more sense as we go along. You'll get the gist of it. And part of the way I recommend doing that is using OBS or Open Broadcasting Software, which is what I use right now to broadcast the class. And some of you have done any streaming. I've probably used OBS in the past to do streaming of any kind. And this very first week, of course, is anomalous as we do the technology orientation and the syllabus acknowledgement quiz. So those are due tomorrow and Friday, I believe. But as we get going into the actual schedule, things are due 8 o'clock p.m. on Tuesdays. That's kind of our regular cadence of the class. So it ends up looking like this. We've got this kind of like interlocking schedule for project. So here a square represents the life cycle of one creative project. And so it's like introduced. Here we talk a little bit about it, then you turn it in, and then here we do the critique. And so the thing that's a little bit strange here is that I start talking about the next project before you turn it in. And in general, this gives everybody the full weekend to grind on the project, which I think works better. And so we end up with this sort of like interlocking pattern going forward throughout the semester. Great. This semester, spring 2026, we already had Martin Luther King Day off on Monday. We're going to lose Monday, President's Day of February 16th. We're off on, because the class happens here now in this room. When school is off, there's no live stream or anything, right? So obviously Monday, February 16th, spring break, those are the only times we're missing. The rest of it will be here Mondays and Wednesdays, 8:30 to 11:10. And then our last day of classes would be Wednesday, May 6th. And the final exam would be the following Wednesday, which is you presenting the final portfolio of creative projects that we've made throughout the semester. Okay. And I have some of the syllabus information there on my Miro. Okay, the things we're going to need for class: notebook, as I've discussed previously. Those of you who've taken a digital media arts class before, I strongly recommend having some sort of place to store and back up your data. A lot of you may have an external hard drive that you're using for this purpose, especially if you're bouncing around to different computers and don't have your own computer right now. In terms of, what external hard drive to get, something that's USB 3.0, there's absolutely no need to spend more than $100 on this. If you don't have one, you don't need to get one this second. At the beginning here, we'll be doing very small things. But as aspiring digital professionals, it makes a lot of sense to have that, not only in terms of being able to move things between computers, but as part of your data redundancy strategy, which we'll discuss in more detail later on. We'll talk about computers in a second here. A couple other things to keep in mind, to recommend, especially if you have a laptop, having a mouse, an actual mouse, not a trackpad, makes all of this work way easier. All the programs are designed to be using right click, left click, and scroll wheel, and trying to do all of the things on a trackpad just ends up being really, not ideal. It's like doable, but definitely slows you down. So it doesn't need to be a fancy mouse of any kind. You can just grab a $2 mouse from Goodwill. As long as it plugs in via USB, all of them have 3 buttons. That's going to be way better than using a trackpad on a laptop. So that would be something. And then also, if you're on a laptop that does not have a numpad, because we're on Blender, having an extra keyboard may be something you want to explore. Again, that you could just plug in via USB. Blender is set up such that the shortcuts, having the numpad, makes it a lot easier to work with. There's different ways to work around this, but I think it's really, now I make sure that all of my computers have the extra numpad, meaning the numbers on the right-hand side, not just along the top of the keyboard. Because those, as far as the computer is concerned, those are like two separate keys that could be used for hotkeys, right? If you're just typing numbers, you can press 1 over here or 1 over here, but when we're doing other stuff, they're separate buttons. So something to keep in mind. Yes?
Do you have to have like non-timer up on to like make it work?
Yeah. The numlock has to be on for that in order for those shortcuts to trigger. Okay. All right. So we're doing 3D modeling in here. This is going to be heavy, more demanding computationally than English class, where you're writing papers. And as such, the computer you're using matters. And so on the home page, I have the detailed information about this. I also have a very short video about trying to figure out whether your computer will work for this class if you're on Windows. But the gist of this here is we want to be able to do computer graphics, and especially towards the end of the semester when we're rendering more animations and higher fidelity animations, this ends up being usually most people's first experience with like pretty heavy computing, where, like this is not, when we'll get to the point where we're rendering stuff out where it's not happening in real time. And so the computer horsepower matters to some extent. And so we want to have a computer, and the gist of it here, without diverging into a long discussion on computer hardware, is that your computer has two brains, the CPU and the GPU. The GPU is the graphical processing unit. The CPU is the central processing unit. The graphical processing unit is the one that's drawing all the pixels on the screen. Having an NVIDIA GPU will certainly greatly help all of the rendering later on. The first couple weeks here, we're going to be doing fairly simple things. It's not going to be make or break. So you have a little bit of time to get this figured out. So option A, you have a computer at home that has an NVIDIA GPU, either a laptop or a desktop. You're great. You're good to go. You should be able to use that for this class, and I think you'll do okay. Option B, the institution has a whole bunch of pretty nice laptops that you can check out for free for the semester, right? So not like the library where you check it out for 2 weeks, you gotta bring it back, and everything else like that. This is, you check it out at the beginning, you get to use it all semester long, and you return it at the end of the semester for free. However, as you may suspect, these go quickly. We're trying to get more of them, but there is a limited amount right now. And so if you know that your home computer is not going to cut it, and you want to check out a computer from the school, the link to do that is here, right on the home page. And I would do that as soon as possible. You'll fill out that form. They'll look at your schedule and see that you're in AVC 185 and make sure that the computer that they provide to you is one that would work for this class. So this is great and available to everybody. But if you're going to do this, I would do it as soon as possible. Later on Discord, some students gets financial aid money, or they're like, oh, well, I'm just starting this, but I want to commit to it and buy a computer. And I usually post some sort of recommendation about what I think would work there if you want to get something soon. And then also look around. All these computers are really good. These are less than 2 years old at this point. Like they're pretty new. We refreshed this room. And so all the computers in here have all the software and they're all pretty quick. So when is this room open? TBA. We have to wait, see how the schedule settles down here during the first week, and then I'll be able to let everyone know. I can let you know for sure that on Mondays and Wednesdays, obviously via the schedule, I'm the only person teaching in here. And so even during my other classes, if you want to be in here working on Mondays and Wednesdays, that's usually fine. Like there's not usually so many people in here that it becomes a problem. So those times would certainly be available in here to work. And not only do we have the regular workstations around the edge of the room, we have our two super powered workstations in the back with our Wacom tablets already hooked up, which is great. It's the same computer, but they've got the Cintiq Wacom tablets there, which are great. So these are what we have available here in terms of computing resources. If you have a relatively recent Mac, I'm not 100% up on the ins and outs of the Mac computers over the last 5 years, but if it's somewhere around that, I think you'll probably be all right for the class. For this class, for AVC 200, it presents a lot of problems, but for here, it should be fine. Great. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay. And so part of this first week, your technology orientation that's due on Friday is doing a personal computational audit. What powers of computation do you have to leverage? And then decide what is your strategy for increasing your computational capacity over the course of the semester. Yes, Sean.
If I am pretty confident that if I can do all my homework on my laptop, do I still need like an external hard drive? Is it just
If you can do all the work on the laptop, that's fine. The hard drive is not only for the students to store things on when they're using a borrowed computer, it's also part of a backup strategy that if your laptop spontaneously combusts, you're not going to lose all your work. But probably not next week, maybe the week after, I'll subject you to a excruciatingly boring lecture about data redundancy, where we can address that in really uncomfortable detail.
Okay, next question. Would you suggest like a terabyte USB drive, or should I just get
Yeah, that's going to be like way more than enough for this class. It should be enough for all of your classes.
like a thumbstick, or does it not matter versus hard drive or thumbstick?
Some not bargain basement thumb drive is usually good, because then it's not just the amount of data, it's the the bit rate of the thing. And so as long as you're not getting it at the dollar store or something, like, then it's probably reasonable at that point. The only other downside to thumb drives is the physical size of thumb drives. Like the student misplacement rate for thumb drives is alarmingly high, and I don't see the same thing happen with the larger external drives. So maybe if you take your thumb drive and encase it in some sort of like larger thing that it would be impossible to misplace, like that might be a good strategy. But yeah, it should be. It used to say no, but now they're super, super fast as long as it's like a reasonable sized one. Yeah. Yes.
This is more of a comment I want to mention about like the numpads.
Mm-hmm.
I know Blender, like especially like with viewing, you use the numpads a lot. I believe there's an option in the preferences to
Mhm.
emulate numpad, but it is preferred to have.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. We'll talk about that. But yeah, it's just way easier with the keys over there. What was your name?
Mark.
Mark. Okay. Yes. Kevin.
Speed, basically, is that gonna be an animation versus the 3D modeling?
It matters.
That way I can wait until we start the animation. This is pretty new.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I'm probably gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But my kid has a computer, I can take hers
Mm-hmm.
if I really need
Yeah.
She has a Windows-based.
Yeah, I'd give her the heads up that you're going to be in about a month, game time is over, and this is Dad's rendering machine at this point. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? Again, if you're checking one out from the school, which is, an amazing program that I'm really happy our institution is able to provide, do it probably like now, like right after class, so that you get in there. Because when you check one out from the school, like it's the institution can provide this for you at institutional speed. Okay, so meaning like you'll fill out the form, perhaps someone will look at the form today, later the form will be processed, and then there's sometime later in the future, hopefully later this week, maybe next week, that they would hand them out. Okay, so it doesn't happen right away, which is another reason to start the process now. Okay, great. More stuff over here. We talked about required things. Again, part of our weekly work is making a presentation video about whatever it is that you've made this week, and that's your prime opportunity to ask questions about that may have arisen while working. So you need to be comfortable sharing your work with the rest of the class. This is not an optional part of the class. This is required. This has presented a problem for some students in the past. If this is a fundamental issue, again, this may not be the right fit. So keep that in mind. I use the word critique for these, reviews and feedback on Wednesdays, because that is the word used in the art department for feedback sessions. This, just because it just means we're talking about whatever it is you did. It does not inherently mean that it's going to be 2.5 hours of critical analysis of everybody's stuff, right? We're just talking about it, right? It may not seem like it today, but like I'm a pretty laid back, easygoing human being, and like it's not some sort of very critical experience, right? The main thing is we get to see each other, hear each other talk about our work, right? I mean, there's only so much you can learn from me. Inevitably, the students learn way more from each other. And so this is one of the ways I try to facilitate that kind of learning. So you have to be prepared and willing to share your work with everybody on a weekly basis. We'll look at a lot of artistic examples throughout the course of the semester, and it's art, and so they may have messages and or images that some people think are controversial or offensive. These are artworks, and I have considered whether or not the relevance and importance of the work is such that it should be presented in class. And so I've thought about that for pretty much everything that we look at. But there's a wide range of interpretations about about the content of these works. The content of the works doesn't necessarily represent my views or the community college's views or Maricopa County Community College's views. So keep that in mind as we go throughout the semester. We talked about all of this in terms of mouse, keyboard, notebook. Notebook is the big one. Notebook. And we talked about this. And yeah, this is a big can of worms. So we'll yeah, I've been thoroughly involved in monitoring, using, speaking about the rise of artificial intelligence and large language models and machine learning algorithms as they're applied to computer graphics and other contexts over the last, whatever it is now. It's only been like 3.5 years. I mean, it's bananas when you start to think about how quickly all of this has unfolded. I was an invited guest speaker for the last 2 years at Paradise Valley Community College to talk about the use of AI and art. And so over the course of the semester, this is part of the landscape at this point, and we'll talk about the technical, environmental, ethical ramifications of these tools. We'll maybe experiment with some of them, and my requirement for you and wish for the rest of society is for complete transparency here. If you're going to use one of these tools, you should just be very, very, very clear about what tool it is you're using and how you're using it. That allows us to really have some sort of like legitimate, good faith jumping off point for the discussion of this technology. So keep that in mind. This isn't going to be something that we're running up against here in the first few weeks, but as it goes on, for those of you who have been checking in or paying attention to this in any way, like this is being built into some of the fundamental technology of using a computer, and then also some of the very specific tools that are being used for computer graphics and animation. And so your opportunity to be transparent has to do with, when you turn something in on Canvas, in the notes section saying like, well, here I did all this, and then I used this tool for that. And, linking to the tool would be the way to go about it there, right? So if everyone is just completely transparent about what it is they used and how they used it, I think that that's good for us. There's not a lot of writing assignments in this class where we're formulating large papers. Our video presentations kind of take the place of that, and so that kind of sidesteps a lot of the stuff that's happening in English class or a lot of the other classes where we have these weekly writing assignments, and people may be not completely transparent about what it is they're doing in order to complete those assignments. So yeah, there's a lot more to say about this. This is all I'm going to say about this for now. So we want to have transparency about that. Yeah, I use a lot of these tools. I mean, I'm partial to the Anthropic tools, and in terms of formulating and building tools for the class, I've done a bunch of code development using AI tools that we'll see here coming up. I have a lecture search tool that works really great for everybody, things like that. I'll talk about it at length. Late work is accepted at my discretion. The thing I want to say here is we have this weekly schedule, and I highly encourage you to show what you have each week, right? There may be some weeks where, well, I know the assignment was to do this, and I did most of that, and I had a problem with this thing. In general, my grading tends to be generous. It's really important that you stay up with the pace of the class. I'm trying to move us all along week by week together. What I've seen happen in the past is that students, something doesn't get 100% of the way there for 1 week, and then they decide not to turn it in that week. And that just starts a accumulation of stuff that many students don't come back from in terms of like being able to actually get caught up again, because there's a lot of work each week. And so I would far prefer you staying up with the class, even if you're not hitting all of the bullseyes that week, rather than waiting, because then you're out of our weekly review schedule, right? And staying within our weekly review cadence and pattern helps everybody move forward at a good rate. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. One of the reasons I'm a generous grader happens to be that and I'm encouraging you to show what you have, is our feedback and discussion on Wednesdays is far and away the biggest value proposition of this class, right? In order to have your work presented and have everybody take the time and attention to like seriously consider what it is you did, how you do it better, all those kind of things, that's super valuable. It's not something that happens often once you're outside of this system, right? Having someone sit down and talking seriously about whatever it is I've made is not, as it doesn't happen as regularly as it does here. So this is by far the most important part of the class. And what we're doing here is that we're developing a creative portfolio. The end of the semester, you'll have usually three big projects that we've worked on throughout the course of the semester. Those will be the primary parts of your portfolio that you present at the end. Usually the end of the class is not some nail-biting race to the end, but rather like, well, we've already done all this stuff. Now we've got it in the portfolio, and here's what I did, because we've incrementally done work throughout the course of the semester, ideally, right? I try not to have it build to a crazy crescendo where everything's riding on the last week, because it's a terrible pattern, because there's a lot of other classes that do that. And if you're in 3 classes and they're all crazy heavy weeks in the last week of the semester, that ends up being, it's tough for anyone at that point. So the creative work is far and away the thing that you should be focused on if you're trying to become a creative digital professional here, right? The grades are, in terms of your professional development and professional application, right? Like not as critical. It's important to pass the class, but by far and away, when you're working, people are going to ask you, can I see what it is you've made? Can I see your stuff? I've had virtually no one ever ask me to be like, yeah, that's really great. Oh, I love that thing. Can I see your transcripts? No one has ever said that to me, right, in any sort of serious context. It's about the work. And so that's what we're focusing on here every week, right? And that's super hard. Making new creative things every week is not easy. So that's part of the reason we keep this weekly schedule, is to normalize the idea of making things. Okay, questions about what I've presented here so far in terms of the class? The rest of the syllabus, a lot of boilerplate stuff. I have to provide the terms of service for all the tools. Yeah. The institution requires that everybody have a lot of the same language in their syllabus now, which is what it is. The syllabi end up being large documents. Grading ends up being mostly what you would expect. All of our weekly projects are weighted at 75%, and then the final portfolio presentation is 25%. Again, if you've been working along all semester long, presenting the final portfolio is should be no problem. Yeah. Everybody's good. No questions here.
Is there a tutor for this class?
Yeah, so we are going to have a tutor. Fabio Bruzzese is going to be the tutor again this semester. He's done the tutoring primarily through Discord, and he He's going to post in the Discord channel about how to get a hold of him. He's making a video about that. So, there we go. His availability, his preliminary schedule here is Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 to 4, and then by appointment. And so stay tuned. That may adjust as we settle in here and figure out when people need help and so on and so forth. And you'll primarily contact him through Discord. He's going to make a video all about that that'll post to Discord so that you can understand exactly how to get a hold of him. Okay, good. I feel like we covered all of this. So the Discord channel is there, all the time, but that does not, I'm making that available for all of us to be there, right? To send messages to each other. I'm not committing to responding to Discord messages at any time, right? It's usually like regular business hours, Monday through Friday-ish. And so keep that in mind. That's part of my reason there of making things due at 8 on Tuesdays is to do what I can to try and encourage you to maybe develop better sleep habits than just get better at sleeping, right? It's mission critical for me at this point. I realize at your age, for many of you, you can not worry about it, and certainly I didn't at your age, but I wish, looking back on it and taking that a little bit more seriously. So anyways, I make things due at 8 rather than midnight in order to encourage people to actually get some rest before we talk about things on Wednesday. Great, but in the interest of, again, staying with the class and turning things in, the Canvas assignments do not shut off at 8, meaning that you can no longer upload stuff. You can upload stuff afterwards, right? It'll still get there and we'll be able to see it on Wednesday, before we look at it the next day, right? So does that timing make sense there, right? You're turning it into Tuesday night. That following Wednesday, the next day is when we're talking about it here in class. Okay, good. Great. I think we're good here. I don't think anyone's on the live stream right now, but everything's going out over there. So over here, right, this is OBS. And yeah, this you can't see it online, but here in person, right, the wall behind me is painted green, and so it cuts me out and puts me over there in the corner. And on your weekly presentation videos, in the technology orientation assignment, which is due on Friday, you'll need to record your first OBS video, sort of introducing yourself, and then posting that on Discord. And having the camera on, I'm encouraging it as strongly as one can encourage it without making it required. I realize, again, there are some legitimate and important reasons as to why someone would not want to turn on their camera. However, that being said, I strongly encourage you to have the camera set up for your weekly presentation videos, right? It's part of, again, establishing this learning community where we know who each other are, can address each other by name. It's a really important part of establishing these relationships. Some of you may think that's nonsense, and that's just how olds do it. And I'm willing to have that argument, not now, but some other time, that, I'm just, my time has passed and the idea of valuing in-person or as close as we can get interaction is passé. However, my advice to you strategically is that for your, the beginning of your careers, you'll be working with and or for people who may be around my age who I think do predominantly value some sort of in-person, eye-to-eye contact of some kind. And learning to excel in that environment, regardless of how it is you see the environment later when you're calling the shots, it may be strategically important for you to consider developing that skill at this time. So just like being here in person, having the camera on for your presentation videos, again, not required, because I do recognize there are some situations where I agree there's some real reasons as to why you would not want to turn your camera on. But if you're just doing it, not doing it because it's anything less of a completely important reason, then I would reconsider that and make sure you have your camera on during the weekly presentation videos. Is that clear? Have I emphasized this strongly enough? I'm sure I'm not the only person who has told you this about appearing online. So I'm just trying to be gentle but firm in terms of like, it's fairly important, I think, to be able to have that skill in order to make real contact with people. And as such, I call the lower right-hand corner. And so when you're setting up your videos, you can use one of the other corners, right? Because when I play back the videos here in person, if you use the lower right-hand corner, and then it's like me, and then you're like behind me here in your video, and it just looks like really weird and awkward. And so, yeah, this is my corner. You can use the other corner over there. Does that make sense? Okay. And I talk about all of that in, using OBS. Once you have OBS set up on your computer, it should just be, ready to go then. So it's a little bit of work here to get it configured, but then once you're ready to go, it should be no problem. And yeah, some of you may use other screen recording stuff. If you want to, fine. But OBS, has been my experience that it not only is it, once it's set up, pretty rock solid, it also has very, very, very low overhead. And so for what we're doing, right, in terms of, this is similar to like video game streaming in that like when you're streaming the game is taking up the preponderance of computational resources for the machine. And so you don't want the broadcast to also eat into that. And what we're doing is similar there in that we want most of the resources for the computer to be for doing the work and not struggling with all of the, broadcasting and recording of your stuff. And so OBS really does a good job of that. And if we look over here on modules, we'll see the main thing for Friday. And so, yeah, once you got everything signed up for here, then things will, we don't have to do as much of this every week. I'm just trying to get everybody to just get all their stuff set up. If you're going to get a new computer, either renting one or whatever, still you can go through this because all the licenses we use it's either an open license or it's transferable or whatever. So don't worry about that. We're using Miro. Miro is the online whiteboarding tool. All of this is Miro. It's like this infinite digital whiteboard space where you'll see me pop back and forth between this as we're doing stuff. The OBS. This is a fairly short video about me setting up OBS, and your first OBS thing is to make your presentation video. Discord, a lot of you already have this set up. I'm primarily, even when I'm at my computer, most of the time I'm using Discord on my phone. You don't have to, but that's available. The only thing here with Discord is you don't need to make a new Discord account that's tied to your Maricopa email. If you want to do that, fine, but you don't have to. What I do request is that this is a link to server nicknames. So server nicknames means that you can change how your name appears on our server. And I would like you to change your server nickname on our server to the name you want to use to be addressed in class, okay? Everyone can see how this would be problematic, right? Otherwise, it's just a whole stream of names, and I have no idea who I'm talking to at any point, right? I don't know who Darth Pancreas is, and that was an actual one from years ago. That's my favorite. And so, yeah. However it is that you're addressed in class, just change your server nickname to that, so that the feed on Discord makes some kind of sense, and I can have a chance of knowing who it is I'm speaking to there. Yeah, it's not super difficult. Everyone has done that in the past with no problems. Your introduction video. So the video here, you're going to post on your Maricopa YouTube account because the video will be too big to embed on Discord, right? So in general, Discord, we're going back and forth, maybe some images. If there needs to be a longer video, posting it to your Maricopa channel, just making it unlisted, is the way to go there, right? You don't need to get Nitro, okay? Discord's going to try and sell you Nitro because that allows you to upload bigger stuff, but you don't need to upload bigger stuff. You can link to it after you've uploaded it, in this case, to YouTube. Yes?
So, Mark, that's the question I had about I have a couple of YouTube channels, and the one from Maricopa,
Mm-hmm.
that's my legal name, and that's the one that I cannot change
Uh-huh.
because of the admin. Are you the admin?
No, like the change, yeah, that, I can forward you to someone that you can talk to, yeah,
Would you please?
yeah,
But
yeah.
Also, the other idea would be that I could still use, since I'm just posting a link,
Mm.
unless it's the way you populate your review on Wednesdays, I could still post it to my Backpack Live channel.
Yeah,
Just
that's
send a
that's
link.
totally fine. I don't care. As long as it's the big thing here is just that it's not, you're not trying to upload it to the Discord server. That's the key
Yeah,
thing.
right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But the ones that when we send the assignments,
The
I
usual-
have never recorded, because I've been in the classroom.
When you send me the weekly review videos, we're usually just uploading the actual video file to Canvas, right? And Canvas, we have the space for that. On Discord, we do not, because, we're not, this is a free Discord server, and obviously there's just not enough space for that, right? So when we do the stuff and upload it to Canvas, we have enough space there. That's an official school thing. But in this beginning case here, for this first week, it's just good to get you to go through the whole process, right? You're recording the video, you're putting the video up on YouTube and putting the link there, right? Just sort of, okay, I got the whole way through that. Now I understand how all that stuff works when I need it. Okay, great question. Anyone else? Okay, good. Yeah, Discord, nicknames, Blender. We're going to be downloading Blender 5. I'll get to that in a second. If you already have an Epic Games account and launcher, that's fine. That's all you need right now. Adobe Creative Cloud. So because you're in those of you who don't know, when you're in a digital media arts class, you have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud suite of things on your home computer. This video details logging into that with your Maricopa account and then which Creative Cloud applications should you have downloaded. I would say these here. Again, this is out of my control. So it's we have had issues where this doesn't work for somebody, like you can't get logged into the Adobe Creative Cloud, and you've got to talk to the help desk about that. I have no control over the systems that grant everyone access. It's not every student. It's the students that are in the digital media arts program that have access to this, and their system for managing this doesn't work 100% of the time, but does work most of the time. Okay. Great. So that's, getting everything set up there for the technology orientation, right? It's not doing this week after week after week. I kind of front load it so everybody gets everything set up and is ready to go. Then after that. Sound good? Okay, and that's due on Friday. Okay, all right, let's go around the room real quick and do names, and then we'll get started with everything. So yeah, Casey Farina, Dr. Casey Farina, Dr. Farina, if you're really trying to ingratiate yourself for some reason, but Casey is fine. I've been here for, over 15 years at this point. I've been residential faculty for more than 10 years. And yeah, this is, I really love doing this. We've been doing, like the digital media arts at Glendale Community College over the last 10, 12 years has taken a, dynamic and gigantic step forward. As far as I'm concerned, what we're doing here is one of, if not the best program available for doing this kind of thing in the West Valley. Glendale is really great, and some of you may have to take classes when they're not being offered at Glendale. My recommendation is Mesa. Mesa has a really great program, and in general, I'm in touch with the people who teach there, and they do a great job too. And part of the advantage of going to Maricopa County Community Colleges now is that all of the schools share the same degree programs. And so if a certain school isn't offering a class that you need and it's at a different class, it's at a different school within the Maricopa County Community College district, then you can take it over at that school and it will count towards your degree program. So all of the Maricopa County Community Colleges do, to some degree, function as one gigantic institution. So it's good to keep that in mind because, like I said, limited institutional resources. We just can't offer every class every semester for a variety of reasons, right? There's not enough teachers, and then also there's, as you've all experienced, there's the classes we're offering, how many students are in those classes. If there's not enough students in the class, they don't want the class to go. So there's this fundamental institutional friction with that situation. So it is what it is. But this idea that you can take classes at the other institutions does a lot to sort of resolve that. Great. Okay, let's start here.
My name is Heidi Parr Lopez.
Hi, Heidi.
I guess I'm honestly just really excited to be in this class because I do have some experience with Blender, and I really enjoyed my last animation class. So I'm just really excited for that, and like experimenting with animation interactions.
Cool. Awesome. Welcome, Heidi. Let's go this way.
My name's Backpack, public mural artist, and was a member of the United Scenic Artists Union, paid for all movies, videos, set, scenery, and custom cars and stuff like that, airbrush. And I have some experience with the program that used to be a couple of semesters ago, Max on C4D, and I really want to do Blender. I'm excited to put Blender into my artwork. I do a lot of, I've been doing Adobe stuff for forever, Photoshop and all that, After Effects, but I really am excited about Blender.
Awesome. Heidi, Backpack. Yeah, as of fall 2024, all of the digital media arts classes at GCC switched to Blender. Just it's continuing rapid development, and also, again, getting back to the idea of equity in education, making education and professional tools available to absolutely everyone. The software is open source and free. And so that's the students coming in. A lot of you, probably the majority of you, have used it before. And yeah, we're definitely at an inflection point with the industry where everyone under, 25 is primarily has experience with Blender. It's not the case for people older than that. And so, your careers will be marked by that sort of transition. But yeah, all of the digital media arts classes use Blender now, and yeah, I feel while every program has things, the availability of it, I think, ultimately overrides a lot of the other concerns at the end of the day. Awesome.
Me next?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Mark, and I really like video editing a lot. That's one of my favorite passions, and I also like video games as well. And I'm studying animation and time-based media, and I'm excited to add animation to my portfolio.
Great. Awesome. Heidi, Backpack, Mark, and Kevin, right?
Kevin, right. I'm a retired accountant. Picked up sculpting, painting, drawing, and video, and took a class. The teacher was in Georgia, and she referred me to you, by the way. I can't remember what it was. Excellent class on 2D and animation, etc. It was fun. Picked up 3D printing, and I take my sculpting, I use my 3D printing, print it, and use that in sculpting, turn them into bronze pieces. So I want to learn how to do 3D CAD, CAM writing, as well as animation. The animation was fun. So I started screwing around with Shaper 3D and with Tinkercad, of all things,
Mm-hmm.
the little baby. And I'm like, okay, I got to try Blender, and it freaked me out really fast because it's so sophisticated and hard but easy. Does that make sense? What I just said? It's hard to use, but it's once you figure it out, it's kind of easy. You're like, oh wow, I can do spirals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So my goal is to learn that and get really good at it, so I can do a lot more modeling for my bronze pieces as I move along.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. And for those of you who don't know, scheduled to open in fall 2026 this year, our new STEAM Center, we're calling it the STEAM Center, STEAM Building, STEAM whatever, on the north side of campus, just behind the Fire and Emergency Services building. That's going to have a maker space, greatly expanded from what's at the library, with more 3D printers, laser cutters, welding, woodworking, a bunch of that kind of stuff, as well as a virtual reality based classroom. And all of my classes are scheduled to be in there one way or another, fall 2026. So,
And a shout out for the Phoenix Forge as well,
Yeah.
which is free for us.
yes,
Are you all aware of the Phoenix Forge?
thank you for calling that
It's
to everyone's attention.
free for us students, and it is tremendous. It is absolutely tremendous. You can do pretty much welding, woodwork, 3D printing, clothing.
Yeah, textile work. Yeah. Yeah, the Phoenix Forge is a Maricopa County Community College facility. So this is right downtown on Van Buren, just down the street from the Van Buren. You may have seen a show there, between the Van Buren and McDonald's. And yeah, this is a space sort of, mostly closely associated with Gateway. I guess it's technically under the Gateway umbrella, but it's not at Gateway Community College. Gateway Community College is like further east. And so this makerspace is available for all Maricopa County Community College students to use free of charge. And so you can go down there, and there are orientation classes, right? So in order to use the wood shop, you need to take the wood shop orientation class, which is in your interest and their interest, and the idea of having less hands and fingers cut off in the wood shop there. And yeah, it's great. Like, you should really, if you have an opportunity or next time you're downtown, you can just stop in. Ben, the director over there, is an everyone who works there has been unbelievably friendly to a T. And yeah, the facility could get more use. Every time I've been
Blender.
yeah.
I had made some pieces, I scanned them in there, they taught me how to
Mhm.
scan them, and then taught me how to use Blender to fix those files. That's what got me interested in Blender, by the way,
Yeah.
with those guys.
Yeah. And so it's a wonderful time to be doing all this. The overlap between digital fabrication and digital animation, there's a lot of transferable knowledge and skills there. You can do a lot just from Blender into those, manifesting things in different ways. Cool. Okay, so Heidi, Backpack Mark, Kevin, and Sean.
Yeah, so I'm Sean. I took this class because I'm trying to do video game development, and I think I had to take this before I could take the JVC 200.
Yes, I mean, you can get away with it, but it's far and away. Those of you doing the video game program or the animation program, I would recommend doing 185 before 200. Taking them concurrently, also okay, but yeah, it's just you're able to get way more out of 200 if you've got some 185 knowledge coming in.
But yeah, I don't know, my objective is to start a video game development company with my best friend, and he's also currently going to school, but I'm doing like the graphics and animation side of it, and he's doing the coding, so.
Great, awesome. Welcome, Sean, Kevin, Mark, Backpack, and Heidi, and
My name's Max. I'm really passionate about anime. I love movies, stuff like that. I'm somewhat proficient in like Adobe Suite.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm kind of just excited to unlock Blender, do 3D. I've been stuck on 2D for like last 2 years. So
okay, Max.
Max.
Welcome. Adrian.
Hi, my name is Adrian. I also really love animation. I love to do movies. I'm currently working on a music video as a fan project. I would love to use Blender. I've already used Blender as a 2D animation tool with its 3D aspects. So
Great, Adrian. Welcome. Adrian, Max, Sean, Kevin, Mark, Backpack, Heidi, and
My name is Montana. I really like animation, mainly 2D. I really want to create my own adult animation one day with my own characters.
great.
Not like Family Guy, adult, like BoJack Horseman, adult.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's good to clarify.
I like 3D animation. I want to get more into it because I mainly do 2D and I more like 3D.
Okay, great. Montana and Adrian, and behind Montana.
Hi, I'm MJ. I'm currently a preschool teacher while I'm in college, but my biggest dream is to either work in Adult Swim or Larian. I mostly do animation because it's challenging, and I like a job that challenges me to be better.
Cool. Welcome, MJ, Montana, Adrian, and Isaac.
I'm Isaac, animation major here, and I also want to hopefully get a job somewhere in the animation industry. And my experience with Blender, I was also starting out with Tinkercad obviously Blender has less limitations, so quick hop into that.
Great. Welcome, Isaac. Next to Isaac.
My name's Alejandra. I'm relatively new to all this, except for I took a animation class like junior year of high school. So my main goal is to get into the animation industry somewhere. Ultimate goal is probably DreamWorks, but you know, we'll get there eventually. And I'm mostly a painter, so there's a whole 180 for me.
Okay, great. Alejandra, Isaac, Montana, MJ, Adrian, Max, Sean, left, Kevin, Mark, backpack, Heidi, and yes.
My name is Alondra. I haven't like dabbled in animation technology wise, but I do mostly like stop motion animation, like with just paper and pencil.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping to learn more how to use more programs, and I'm kind of on the same boat as Alexandra, or Alejandra, sorry. And hopefully get into the animation industry.
Great. What was your name again?
Alondra.
Alejandra and okay. Jeez. All right. I'll try.
Yeah, I get Alejandra a lot too. So.
I'll try. Yeah. Yes, please.
My name is Kate Antuna. I really like animation and would like to learn it and improve upon it, usually for like personal projects, but I'd like to get into the industry as well. What here kind of scares me, it's like a spacecraft that wants to crash all the time. But yeah, I'm like excited to explore it a little bit more in depth.
Mm-hmm. What was your name again?
Kate.
Kate. Okay. Kate, Alejandra, right? Am I getting that right? Alondra? Yeah. Okay. All right. And
My name is Brianna. I've been messing around on Blender for like 6 years now. I got introduced to it during COVID and decided I'm gonna just start messing around on that. I am hoping to become an animator. I would like to create my own stuff as I'm also a writer.
great. Welcome, Brianna. Brianna, Kate, Alejandra, Isaac, Montana, MJ, Adrian, Max, Sean, Kevin, Mark, backpack, Heidi, and Adrian. Go ahead. What's your name?
I'm Adrian.
Uh-huh. So we got two Adrians. And what do you want to focus on here?
I want to focus on learning on how to model better. Since last semester I did do some modeling for some characters on a game I was making, and I want to learn how to get better and then also like animate better.
Okay. Great. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Okay, everyone got their notebooks ready? Let's get started. All right. So we'll try to get through as much as we can today for the assignment that'll be due Tuesday night, which I may have to alter a little bit. So by the time we're done with the new introduction of the assignment on Wednesdays after critique, I try to get everything up online either that night or Thursday morning. And but you can always get started right away It's not like I'm asking you to do something that we haven't talked about all week. We've been talking about it for the better part of 5 hours at that point, and so it'll be clear what's happening. Let's talk a few things about how I think about things. First principles thinking. In general, the program tries to emphasize principles and fundamental ideas over, quote unquote, teaching the software. We have to use software at some point, right, in order to do stuff. But the more you understand the fundamental ideas behind how things work in computer graphics and animation, the more transferable your knowledge will be between pieces of software, right? This is, everyone's excited about using Blender. A lot of you have used Blender. That's great. Will we all be using Blender in 5 years? Like, maybe? Like, who knows at this point, right? But the underlying knowledge about how these things work, the programs are I find them way more similar than they are different, right? So one of the ubiquitous, omnipresent conversations in animation or computer graphics is like, what program are you using? They're just tools, right? You have some sort of artistic vision, you're using that. Of course, people gravitate towards one thing or the other for some reason. Blender seems to satisfy a lot of different artistic ideas and strategies, and so it's fairly flexible in that way. But over and over and over again, I try to talk about the principles, regardless of the software, things that you can take from use as your general knowledge base in order to steer your decision making throughout working with this stuff. We're going to be using Blender 5. I mean, I think if you download it right now today, it's on 5.1. The step from whatever it was before, 4.8 to 5 was a relatively big change in the software. And so sticking, whether you're at 5 or 5.1, is more important than not being on 4.8. There were some important updates that happened there. Yes.
Is it okay to be on like 5.0.1?
Sure. Yeah. We may run into stuff there. Yeah. For the most part, the other principle to understand here is you can have multiple versions installed at the same time on your computer, right? This is another advantage here compared to some other pieces of 3D graphics software where you may not be able to have multiple versions installed. Blender, you can have multiple versions installed. You can open something in one version or another version for the most part, and that makes it a little bit more flexible. Also, the Blender installation itself isn't ginormous, right? It's a relatively medium-sized piece of software at this point. And so all of this makes it possible to have multiple versions installed. And so 5+ would be a good way to go here, right? Whatever they're saying when you just, look at the link there in terms of the, here, download Blender today, the whole Blender Foundation is doing a really good job of updating that. And the one that's available on the website is generally, the most reasonable trade-off between up-to-date and reasonably stable, right? You can choose to go in either of those directions. You can step further back in time and theoretically get something that's more stable, maybe, or you can go to a newer version and get something that has quote-unquote more features, but may be substantially less stable, right? So we're doing this kind of work is always trying to find some sort of balance there, right? I don't want the software to crash. I also want to, do stuff. So you have to find the trade-off there. Great. And like I said before, Blender is open source. So this means people can download the source code and change it, and more importantly, they can extend the software. And so this is, the good news is lots of people can develop for Blender. The bad news is lots of people can develop for Blender, right? So that, I'll probably make that joke like every class from now on. The core program is great, but in order to make it more useful, there's going to be a lot of ways to extend the program. In Blender vocabulary, these are add-ons or extensions. So their add-ons are already there when you download them. You just kind of enable them. And extensions you have to download and then enable. We'll see that they're in two slightly different parts of the interface there. So this is one of the big things to be aware of here at the beginning, is that if you see me doing something and then you're looking at your program and either like you don't have those buttons or you don't have that interface or something looks substantially different, this most of the time it comes back to this issue. I have some add-on enabled or extension enabled and you do not at that point. Unfortunately, the program does not do a great job of, once you enable some add-ons, of letting you know, okay, all of this stuff comes from this add-on. So it can be a challenge later to sort of parse that, what's happening there with those situations. I'll call all of this to your attention to the best I can here at the beginning, but not only for watching me do stuff, but when you're looking around at other people doing tutorials and whatnot, if they're doing something that looks substantially different, that's almost always the case. They have some other thing installed that is not there. The good news is when you're enabling these add-ons and extensions, 99% of the time, you don't have to restart the program in order to use the add-on. You just sort of check the box and now it's there, which is great. A lot of other programs like Photoshop, for the most part, like if you install a new filter, you got to restart Photoshop so it can do all the things to use the filter and all that kind of stuff. Blender doesn't function like that. It's a little bit more flexible. Great. So keeping that in mind as we're going forward here, in this very first week of stuff, where all this idea of add-ons and extensions, we're going to get back to actually doing things here in a second, but just to sort of close the book on this. So edit preferences gives us this window, and this is where you can opt into these extensions. For the most part, right, so the add-ons here, these, when you download Blender, they are there, sitting on your computer, just waiting for you to check the box and enable them, right? If I wanted to enable Rigify, I check that box and now the Rigify stuff is able to be used in the program, right? Why not just check all these boxes and call it a day? Well, I mean, you're just going to sort of unnecessarily clutter the interface, and the interface can be challenging as it is, and so I try to be conservative there. Extensions are, again, not in that initial download, and you need to sort of go get them. So for instance, I don't know, anything as an example here, if you were to install it, then it would show up here under the extensions. And so some of the, you can search these up here, both the add-ons and the extensions, right? So if I'm looking for Rigify, I can search for it there. That's super useful. The add-ons list is substantially shorter than the extensions list. And then it's also important to note that extensions can also come from just the internet. So there's the ones that you could search for here, and then other developers can provide extensions or design extensions that they make available on their website or on the Blender Marketplace or whatever. We're not going to be using any of that stuff here at the beginning, but to be aware that that stuff exists. Like QRemeshify is from GitHub. It's not I installed it separately from this. Okay, so just to be aware of that here at the beginning. So most of the time, if there's some sort of substantial difference, this is the reason why. But I try, especially here at the beginning, to call it to your attention when I'm doing something that is part of an add-on. So for instance, one of the first shortcuts I would write down here on my page of notes that I would set up right now that's labeled shortcuts is the N key. And so the N key opens up this side window over here. And this is where most, but not all, of the add-on extension interface stuff lives over here, right? And so I have the screencast keys extension on. I'm going to turn that on. So now down here, it'll show what I'm clicking, which will be great. And so that's how I get to the controls for that. And so N sort of open and closes that. And for the most part, you don't have to use the shortcuts. There's most of the time, almost all the time, some visible interface element that you can click on, right? So you don't have to constantly memorize all of the shortcuts here at the beginning. And I'll set up some things to help you with that. For instance, this little, but sometimes it's very, very, very subtle. So like this tiny little thing right here, this is the thing you can click on to open up that window. Most of the time I just press N in order to open and close that over here. For instance, one of the things over here, up here we have all sorts of viewport configuration stuff. And one of the things I'm going to do right away in this menu here, which is the Gizmo menu, is I'm going to click all three of these so that when I select something, I'm getting the axis, right? And so over here, I'll probably go back and forth between these terms, right? The axis or the gizmo, if you're more of a Gremlins person. Who's seen Gremlins? Okay, great.
Good movie.
Yeah. Welcome to a whole semester of me making references to movies that, a lot of you probably have not seen. Kevin will really appreciate it in Backpack. So now when I would click on something and select it, I get the gizmo down here. Great. Okay. So what are we doing here? So we're representing things in, let's see here. We're representing things in 3 dimensions, and the whole program is designed to manipulate 3 things: points, edges, and faces. That's all we're doing. At the end of the day, everything that we'll model over the course of the semester is going to be composed almost entirely of these 3 atomic elements for representing something within the computer. Things get a little more confusing in that sometimes there's slightly different vocabulary for some of these things. And so a point, you can also say vertex, right, or vertices here. And this is, when you're talking about points, it's important to understand that a point is going to be infinitely small, right? It's not going to have, you can't scale a point. We're just simply describing a single point in space. There's no other information there. It's a point or a vertex. An edge connects 2 of those points, and then a face essentially fills in between some of the edges. Face is the Blender term that you'll I'll try to call this out when we're talking about things, is that occasionally there's vocabulary that you should know that is Blender specific, and there's other vocabulary which is just more general computer graphics vocabulary. And so here, polygon is going to be similar to face. When it comes down to it, depending on the program and the context, there can be a lot of splitting hairs over exactly what these words mean in terms of their manifestation in 3D. But especially here, especially for the first month, will be a lot of interchange there, right? So points, edges, and faces. The whole program is a way to manipulate those three things, right? The entire endeavor could be represented like this, right? Quote unquote, behind the scenes inside the computer, it's just spreadsheets the whole way down, right? And so here in this view, this is the geometry nodes view that allows you to see the raw data. And so here, as we just have this cube right now, this is the data for that cube. And so this is a list of all of the points that are in that cube and the X, Y, and Z coordinates for each point in that cube. The edges here, this is going to be a list of which ones are connected, and the faces, and here this is the coordinates in the UV map for that cube, which we're not going to soon. We'll get to exactly what that means. But this is what's happening behind the scenes, right? If you wanted to, you could literally make anything just by providing the correct data in spreadsheet form here. Obviously, that's an incredibly abstract and difficult way to do any of this work, right? It would be very, very divorced from our real world experience, right? We sort of intuitively understand three-dimensional space because we live in it. And so there's that. And part of what the program is doing is it's trying to construct tools and environments to manipulate things like we do in three-dimensional space so that you can leverage all of your artistic and all of your artistic intuition in this form, right? Trying to create everything with spreadsheet interface is not great, right? It's just not, it requires a lot of translation. But it's important to understand that throughout the history of computers and computer graphics and digital representation, digital audio, digital video, this is how all of it starts off, right? This is why computers used by very, very, very few people at the very beginning, one of the reasons they're used by very, very, very few people is that all of the interface development didn't exist at the beginning. And so now we live in an age where there's a lot more work has been done in order to make these tools way, way, way more usable. And so here, if I were to look at this cube up here in the top, I switched modes, which we'll get to in a second, and inside each mode, inside the edit mode, we have access to the raw geometry, the things I looked at in that spreadsheet there, the points, the edges, and the faces. And so which thing am I selecting? Here I'm in point mode, and so I can grab a point, right? I could switch to edge mode and grab an edge, right? And you could also switch to face mode and grab a face. Right? You can grab multiple faces and do stuff with it. Yeah, so that's it, right? The whole semester is just learning about different strategies for manipulating these atomic elements that define shapes in 3D. We're artists here and primarily concerned with seeing stuff, right? As I said before, there's this really great convergence now between digital animation and digital fabrication. But ultimately here, at the end of the day, Blender's priority is going to be lighting up pixels on the screen according to a two-dimensional representation of 3D space. So that's really important to keep in mind here, is that we're just manipulating those atomic elements over the entire course. The elements are arranged in space that we're always primarily concerned with the outer shell of the object. For the most part, we're not worried about the internal density, the internal structure, unless we're going to see it in the animation, right? If we make people, we're just worried about the outer skin of them. We're not, unless we're doing something very specific, we don't need to reconstruct the entire internal structure of that person, right? And so everything is really this outer shell of whatever it is that we're trying to represent. And so that does make things, quote unquote, simpler in that you're not constrained by figuring out whatever the internal structure is of something, but rather that kind of cuts both ways. You don't have to figure that out, so that frees you up to sort of do a bunch of things that are quote unquote physically impossible here, as long as we're staying just in pixel space. We don't have to worry about whether this thing will stand up or not stand up, or be able to actually hold its weight or not. It's just points in space. Great. Okay. So with that in mind, let's just talk about this more. We're arranging these things in 3D space. This is where we're working, or let's say it's where we're visualizing. However, the important thing to understand here, because this starts to matter right away in terms of the way that you interact with it, is that we're working in 2D space primarily as things are set up now, right? This mouse, it doesn't do this, right? There's no Z on the mouse. It just goes left, right, up, down. And so this is two-dimensional information. But we're working in 3D. And so it's important to really understand that conceptual limitation, right? There's some good strategies to employ when considering this, which we'll talk about here in a second, but keep that in mind. One of the reasons we're building this building with this virtual reality-based workspace is that one of the things I'm really bullish about for the future is using virtual reality for artists, for content authoring, right? Not the idea of content consumption, that everyone's going to have VR headsets in their home and use them. That seems to not be the case. But using them as a tool, I think, has some real advantages, because there you're in 3D space, right? You have X, Y, and Z. Here, this is, the reason we have this tool the way it is a lot of historical baggage, right? If we were to start from scratch to redo how to interface with a computer artistically, you probably wouldn't end up at this, and this now, given what is possible. But as things progressed over the development of computers and development of computer graphics, this is where we are. And so it's what most people have. And it presents this fundamental friction here, is that we're doing this, but we're constrained to that. And so we have this dimensional cutoff. We're doing 3D stuff, even if it looks 2D or it looks hand-drawn, for the most part, for the computer, it's existing in a three-dimensional space. But we can not only is the mouse 2D, but the screen is 2D, right? These are not popping out of the screen, the illusion that we're seeing things that have depth and parallax and all that is an illusion that's brought on by the the vanishing lines and the perspective of what it is that we're rendering there. And so at the end of the day, we're still in this class, what are we going to make at the end of the day? What is the thing we actually show to people? In this class, it's going to be a movie, which is a 2D grid of pixels, right? Those pixels may present an image that looks three-dimensional because of perspective, but the fundamental thing we have at the end of the day is yet another spreadsheet of pixels that have RGB values for an entire grid in some sort of 16 by 9 space of some kind, usually. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to come back here. The second shortcut here, tab. So tab goes back and forth. It toggles between object mode and edit mode. And so I'm going to tab back to object mode. This is incredibly important. We talked about I'm trying to do something in Blender and I can't. We talked about the add-on possibly being the issue. The other issue is the mode. You may be not in the same mode. And so while I'm working and you're watching it or taking notes, or you're going back and looking at the lecture later, making note of what mode I'm in when I'm doing something is incredibly important, because not all of the stuff is available in all the modes. You have to be in a certain mode in order to get certain interfaces or certain tools or whatever, right? This matters a lot. And at the beginning, we really just have two modes that we're primarily concerned about, object mode and edit mode. There's lots of other modes, and we'll parse them throughout the course of the semester, but object mode and edit mode are the primary ones. And you see when I go to object mode now, I'm able to move, rotate, and scale, but I'm doing it to the object, right? Before, when I was showing you the atomic elements of 3D representation, I was doing it to points, edges, and faces. Now that I'm in object mode, I can take that first step in terms of stepping away from the spreadsheet and thinking about things more holistically and manipulate an entire object at once. And so taking that step up the ladder of abstraction from point, edge, and face to object is important in that it provides a really convenient way of moving this cube around, right? And I can do that rather than having to, to animate this cube, I could animate it from here to here versus having to animate each point and have them move from, I can address them as an object, right? And so every time we take a step up this level, this ladder of abstraction, of control, we are able to do more, but there is a trade-off there. It's like now I'm opting into addressing this as an object, and I'm saying I'm not concerned with the point level information. And in some cases, that may close off that door. You can't go back down and address the points if you've decided to address it as an object. It depends. So this week, that's about as far as we'll travel on this ladder of abstraction and control. But it's important to realize that this extends infinitely above the atomic elements. And at each point, there's trade-offs with that. So I'm in object mode here. And the next shortcuts to be aware of are just our primary tools for moving things around. So again, I came up here and I turned these on. And the gizmo allows me to interact with the object even without the shortcuts, which I think is very, very, very useful here at the beginning.
Which button did you press again to see that list?
This guy, I believe this is what's the official name for this? The Gizmos menu. And so that's on, right? I really wish it was on by default, but
Right? That's my next question. Every time you open a file, you have to click on a new.
we'll address that next week. Okay. But this week, click the button. So here, yeah, this is fairly settled science. I'll try to call this out as well, where where Blender for the most part lines up with all the other programs. And like I said, I find them more similar than I find them different. But occasionally things will differ here. But the gizmo representation is fairly similar for all of the programs. The arrows represent moving, the cubes represent scaling, and then the circles represent rotating. And so this is fairly consistent. The way that these little cubes and circles and arrows are visually arranged around the gizmo can vary a little bit, but I don't find it, most of the programs do a pretty good job of not making it incredibly cryptic. And so if I grab this one here, I can move it on this axis. If I grab this one here, I can move it on this axis. If I grab the blue one, I can move it up and down. If I grab the blue square, I can now scale up and down. You see how this is going. If I hover over the this axis of rotation, then it allows me to rotate it like so. So I'm able to move these things, manipulate it like this. And again, this would be the case for no matter what I have in the project. You see that when I click on this object in object mode, I have a separate object over here, an icosphere, and I'm able to manipulate this and move it around. And if I click on this one, now the gizmo moves over here, and I'm able to manipulate this object. The shortcuts here to sidestep the gizmo, although I always have the gizmo turned on because I kind of find myself switching gears. Like sometimes I'm in shortcut mode where I'm just jamming the shortcuts and it's working, and other times I want to grab the gizmo and interface it that way. G is going to be the move or grab tool. R is going to be rotate, and S is going to be scale. And so the outlier there is G, right? And if you just think of grabbing, moving, that sort of solves that, or at least allows you to make that separate in your mind for there. Each of these, Blender also has this paradigm of additive shortcuts. And so you can constrain these tools to an axis, which I think this first week, that's one of the things I want to present here, is that because of this 2D to 3D conversion, right? The idea of constraining these tools is really important to be able to precisely manipulate objects, right? And so you can add the dimensions with, you can press GX in order to just move on the X axis. You can GY to just move on the Y axis, and GZ to just move on the G axis. And you can do the same with the other ones, RX, RY, RZ, SX, SY, SZ, right? You can constrain these to those specific axes. That's one way to do this. So a lot of the stuff here I'm presenting today, I'm trying to show you the, I think the ways to manipulate these tools that work well starting off. Blender, like any other program, there's usually several different ways to execute a task. And if you have experience doing it a different way that works for you, by all means, right? I'm just trying to make this work for the most amount of people. That's part of what teaching a class is, right? Like, well, most everybody seemed to understand this, not that. We'll go with this. Right? So, for instance, here, this allows me to demonstrate this 2D to 3D issue, right? If I just grab the icosphere here and press G, this at first seems great. Like, yeah, I can just grab this thing and move it around. However, what am I actually doing here when I press G, right? So when I press G, it goes into grab or move mode. And so now as I move the mouse, I don't need to hold anything down. It's grabbed it, right? And then when I just click, it gets placed there, right? So I'm not holding down G. It's like I just press G and I'm in that move mode, grab mode, and it's not a mode, a tool, and then I can place the object. But let me really emphasize this just very haphazardly pressing the G by itself and moving stuff around is usually not a great way to move stuff, right? Because what are we doing here? Again, I'm only moving it here, two-dimensional with the mouse, relative to the two-dimensional screen, okay? But it's moving in 3D space. So over here, I'm in this is the object tab, right? We'll get to these, probably not today, but later. And so this shows me my basic information about that object. So it's location in X, Y, and Z space, the rotation, and the scale, those primary transform parameters. And even here, I'm moving it in two-dimensional space, but look at the location numbers. All three of them are changing, right? Because I'm just in some arbitrary view. What Blender is actually doing is it's moving it in a 2D plane that's perpendicular to the view that I currently have for the scene. And so if I were to move the view, which I can do by pressing down on the scroll wheel to change the view, and then I press G again, now I'm moving it on a completely different but equally arbitrary two-dimensional plane. And so for just roughing stuff out or just getting things out of the way of other things, that's fine. But in order to, I want this cube to be directly next to this, this sphere to be directly next to this cube, you know, it would be a matter of sort of constantly moving it around so I can see it from the angle that would make sense in order to actually properly place it relative to something else, right? So just pressing G, R, or S by themselves in some just arbitrary view is not a very, usable, sustainable strategy for manipulating things. With that said, let's make it more precise by using, by making the view two-dimensional, right? Because if the view was two-dimensional, like a blueprint, we have two-dimensional tools here, and we're looking at a two-dimensional thing, then we can precisely orient something in space. So for instance, I want to do the same thing here. I want to put a sphere on top of a cube. And so I'm just going to delete these here. And I'm going to learn another shortcut here. Shift A. So Shift A brings up the menu to make a new thing. And there's lots of things that we can make. For this week, we're just concerned with mesh. And then all of the things in this list here. This is another vocabulary word, which is not Blender specific. It's just a computer graphics word, a primitive shape. And so all of the things here under mesh, these are all primitives. And more importantly, these are mostly 3D primitives, although you can have 3D or 2D primitives. Okay, so like a sphere is a three-dimensional primitive, whereas a circle is a two-dimensional primitive, right? Fundamental building blocks. A lot of what we'll make in this class starts off as one or a combination of these fundamental shapes. And so by combining these and then manipulating them, we can get to a lot of other shapes. in your drawing classes, you've learned a lot of the same thing, right? You can represent anything visually as a series of circles, squares, cylinders, and then further manipulate those in order to make more high fidelity shapes. And this, you can take the same strategy here. Okay, so I'll make a cube. There we go. And then I'll make a sphere. I'll make the UV sphere. And yeah, if I just were to look at it at an arbitrary angle and press G and move it up, I can only move it there. I can see it's not really aligned, and so now I'd have to come over here and then kind of do that, and then it's still not there. All right, not great. A better strategy here is that I've got these players on the field. Now I can use my numpad keys to look around, and so I use these a lot. So 1, 3, 7, 9 take me to the top or left, right, top, bottom views. That's why, again, having the numpad keys makes it much easier to manipulate things. If you're on a laptop and you don't have the numpad keys, you'll find that your numbers along the top do not do that. And if you want them to function in that way, you have to enable that here in the preferences under input and here, emulate numpad, right? And so this, if you're on a laptop with no numpad, checking that box is desirable. If you're on a keyboard or a laptop with a numpad, I would say don't check that box so that you have those other numbers up there available for their other functions. It just makes it a little bit more streamlined. But in a pinch, you can turn that on to make that work. So keep that in mind. The other thing you can do, again, without the shortcuts here, is this sort of global gizmo up here allows you to click on one of the edges in order to sort of flip the view of what we're looking at. And so now we need to have a conversation about unfortunately, not clear. This is where the programs differ in what one would have hoped would have been a clear decision we could all agree on. We have not agreed on this, right? In what direction is up. So in Blender, Z is up. Write that down for sure, right? In other programs, this is not the case. I'll show you an infuriating graphic maybe next week that shows you just how divided we are in terms of which way is up in the other programs, okay? So Z is up. But the good news is that the color is consistent. So in all of the programs, the relationship between the color and which axis it is the same. And so red is always X, green or like a yellow-green is always Y, and then blue is always Z. This is true in any program I've ever dialed up, okay? To change this would be, no one's gonna do that at this point, okay? The problem is, like, the red is always X, but what direction is X? That's where it starts to break down from program to program, okay? But for this week, you're only concerned about Blender, we're only concerned about Blender, but just be aware that this is an issue, this is a fundamental issue which can present a bunch of problems when you're moving stuff from one program to another, right? That you need to consider here. And so in Blender, Z is up. And so the other thing I would write down to sort of internalize is that most of the time we're making, especially here in this class, we're making stuff as it would exist in our real world, right? And so it's like there's gravity and there's a floor and walls and ceilings and stuff, right? And so the floor in Blender is the XY plane. So this is important. We have our specific directions, X, Y, Z, but then we have 3 different planes, 3 different 2-dimensional planes that exist in 3D space. And the floor in Blender is going to be the XY plane, whereas up is going to be Z, the blue direction. So important to keep in mind. The good news is that once you learn these colors, you're all set. Every other program uses the same colors for the same letters. It's just which direction those are facing isn't always the same. But in Blender, it stays consistent. Does that make sense for everybody there? Okay. Any questions about what we're doing so far? I'm going a little bit quicker than usual. Probably not going to get quite as far as I would have wanted today, but we'll get far enough to do something. Okay, great. All right, let's manipulate some stuff. So I've got this sphere, and I want to put it on top of this cube. And so now I can press 1 and come over here, and I could select it here in the view, or I could come over here and select it in this. This part of the interface is called the outliner over here. That's a Blender-specific term for this part of the Blender interface, right? This is the outliner. And this essentially lists all the objects. And then you can group objects in collections. Again, that's a Blender-specific word for groups of stuff. Today, we're just primarily concerned with the objects themselves. And the icons for said objects are usually fairly informative. When it's a mesh of some kind, we get the triangle, and then we have lights and cameras there with those things. So in the outliner, I could come over here and select the sphere. And now when after I pressed 1 to look at it from the side, right? How do I know I'm looking at it from the side? Because of this red line, right? The red line, again, is which axis? X, right? And so this is looking at from the side, kind of from the floor. And now if I press G, and just G by itself, not G plus a constraining modifier, this is good. This is a reasonable way to move things around in space. Why is this good? Because I've locked it to this 2-dimensional view. I can't move the object back and forth because I'm viewing it from this direct 2-dimensional slice. And now look at the numbers over there in locate. I can't zoom in on the numbers when I'm actually manipulating something, so you'll see me do the zoom all the time. But in this case, as I move the sphere around, how many numbers are changing? Only 2. That's key. That was the problem with the other thing, right? When I was doing it the other way, and I just had the camera wherever, I pressed G, and I would move the mouse, and all 3 numbers were changing, right? That's the fundamental problem, is that this is a two-dimensional thing. And to change something in 3 dimensions using the 2-dimensional thing, it's inherently imprecise. And so now I can move this on top precisely, and it's exactly on top of that cube, right, as I come back and look. And so the 2 ways of looking at 3-dimensional space are really important to understand. Our 2 different ways here are perspective. And so this is when we have something that looks 3D, right? And how do you know you're in perspective? Usually, objects in the distance are smaller. And the other opposite way to look at this is going to be orthographic, an orthographic view. And this is going to be a 2D slice of 3-dimensional space. And this is important because objects in the distance will be the same size, if they're actually the same scale. Here, I'll demonstrate this here in a second. So this is really important, right? Most of the time, when it comes time to output an image or an animation at the end of the day, we want to output the top thing, right? But often, in order to build the world, build the environment, or build the thing, we want to, a lot of times, be looking at it in these two-dimensional slices in order to precisely manipulate it for all the reasons I previously talked about, the way the tools are set up. So you can see this directly here, right? And so this icon in Blender tells you whether you're currently looking at things with perspective or looking at them in an orthographic mode. And so watch that icon over there. If I come over here and mouse is in the window, I press 1, it snapped it to that view, and then look what happened to this icon. I think this is a pretty good icon in that I feel like this is a very clear representation of like how the space is manipulated visually in order to represent that. So it flattens out the space. So we're totally two-dimensional there. And then as soon as I just grab the middle scroll wheel to start orbiting around, you'll see that that will change to, again, communicate that something is in the distance, right? And so here, if I were to, I'm just going to duplicate these, and there we go, and let's move them off into the distance like so, and then look at this like this. Okay, there we go. And so perspective view, everyone intuitively understands this, right? Things in the distance are smaller. This is how we see the world through our eyes at all times. However, if I press 1 here and flatten it out, look what happened. The second sphere and cube look the same size as the other one, because we would now have this orthographic, flat, blueprint-like projection of space here. And so this allows me to be much more precise. Like, say I want this combination to be at the exact same height as the other one. Well, now I can clearly tell it's not, and I can just, just for right now, just visually line those two things up, right? So that they would both perhaps sit on the floor or whatever it is that we would want to do with them at that point. And then here, if I just start orbiting the camera, as soon as you orbit the camera, it snaps back to perspective view. And so this is how I usually go about doing things, is I'm, flipping back and forth here in order to figure out what angle at which I need to manipulate something to place it, and then, checking in back here to see what it is we're doing and where we are in the view for everything. Does this make sense so far? Okay, so kind of very simple things, but it's all really rooted in this idea of being able to, precisely put stuff in space, which is kind of the whole class. And then what is the best strategy for do that? And then how is the tool fundamentally, in this case, compromised, right? And in the future, like, we live in amazing times, right? This is at the threshold of this being able to step away from this, right? Where we could use three-dimensional tools to manipulate three-dimensional things, which would be, I think, ultimately preferable there. Okay, great. Let's see, how far can we get today? Let's just move some things in space here. So for this week, what I'm going to want you to do is just get in there, move some things around, and we're just going to construct two separate files. In the homework assignment, right, 90% of what we do, I cover in class. Occasionally, there'll be supplemental reading or supplemental stuff to check out. But we're going to kind of dial back. What we want to do here is we just want to make 2 Blender files. And both of them, we're going to make them abstract, okay? And so the very, very short version here is that there's an artistic continuum here of abstract imagery versus representational imagery. Representational imagery is designed to look like a thing, a picture of a horse, right? As opposed to abstract imagery, which functions more as raw objects in space. In the homework, there's a PDF version of Scott McCloud's really important text, Understanding Comics, and the chapter from which he steps through this at a fundamental level. So it's like one chapter of a graphic novel. It's very super light reading. But if you haven't read, has anybody read Understanding Comics? Amazing book. We'll come back to it throughout the semester. Really great fundamental text for understanding visual representation, and it's a graphic novel. So that's there. And in addition to that, I also linked to a very, very short PBS documentary about super condensed history and positioning of what abstract art is, the case for abstraction. So there's all sorts of issues that we're going to spend the entire semester dealing with about trying to represent things from the real world accurately. I don't want you to deal with any of that for Tuesday. I just want you to open the program and move stuff around and just get used to using it, okay? So with that in mind, what we're making for Tuesday is 2 abstract scenes, right? So you can free yourself from the baggage of trying to make it look like something. Rather, we're just making 2 things that are kind of going to be represented by 2 words. One is chaos, and one is order. Okay, so 2 scenes, right? One, chaos. The chaos one, I might start with that one, right? Because an abstract, chaotic image, these don't need to be your magnum opus. These don't need to represent your core artistic spirit. They just need to get in there and move some stuff around for Tuesday, especially because we're 1 class down already. Okay, so this is the condensed version. We'll expand on it next week. And then for order, again, abstract order, but we can move things in a precise way. So those are the 2 things. But you're going to need to fill in some blanks there with the other information in the assignment. Okay, so again, very light reading. It should take you 10 minutes. And then a very, very short presentation about abstract art. How many of you have taken art history already? Yeah, but art history, yeah, I wish we would go backwards, but I have a very specific view there. A lot of times when you're in art history class, we start at antiquity and then never get to now, and now seems, I don't know, I think now is important. So, but anyways, that's where we are. So you may or may not have engaged with the idea of abstraction, which is a newer, last 200 years of art history versus, before that. And so this will help clear up, I hope, some of that concept, okay? So chaos versus order. So let's look here about moving some things around. So for instance here, if I were to move this around, again, we can use the gizmo and we can use some modifier keys. And so one of the important modifier keys here is control. And so control allows us to snap to the grid. And so now I could take this and start to do some things here. Let's say I wanted to create a grid-like structure of some things. So another good shortcut here, Shift D is duplicate. And so if I grab this cube and I Shift D and then hold down Control, I can duplicate this. And let's look at it from the side. And so I'll go Shift D and hold down Control. Here you see I'm snapping to the grid. And so now this allows me to manipulate things with a lot more precision. And now I can start to really do some iterative work by copying the copies, right? So I've got a row of stuff here. And so now I could Shift D this row, hold down Control, and start to do this, right? And this, exactly, yes. So I selected the whole thing like this. For right now, if you do this kind of haphazardly, as I am doing everything, you may end up here grabbing the camera. And for this week, we are going to just go ahead and delete that camera for now. We'll come back to that later when we have time. And so here, now again, let's say I want to do it from the top to create multiple rows of this, kind of like a cube. And so I might select them here so I can actually get all of them and then look at them from the top, and then Shift D. And so part of that issue of trying to be precise and looking at things two-dimensional, I've only presented the upside of that. Allow me to straw man that argument now, is that I may not be able to select things I cannot see because they're blocked by something else, or they're occluded. And so one of the fundamental concepts here is that there may be situations where you need to look at things in one way to select them and look at them another way to manipulate them. That is a common occurrence. And right now I'm just doing it the hard way by like selecting and then changing and then manipulating. You can do all sorts of things later on where we set up two views. This view is for selecting, this view is for manipulating, so you can see them simultaneously, that kind of stuff. So I could do this again. Here, if I were to, Shift D, and then look at this over here. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to select those, come into that view, Shift D, and Control. And so that lets me put things like that. Okay, so this is one way to order things, right? To create things that have very specific and precise placements. You could see that if I were trying to make this arrangement of cubes just from some random angle I'm looking at it here, that would be super hard, right? If not, like practically impossible, right? Without using the modifiers and a bunch of other stuff. And so this could be like the starting of a your scene about abstract order, right? Versus your scene about abstract chaos, right? Making chaos, in this instance where we're not super concerned with the final output, we're just sort of getting used to things, is probably going to be an easier lift, right? So if you're totally new to this, I'd probably start with the chaos one to just sort of, get in there and get messy. And then again, we're just getting used to it today. Like, this doesn't have to represent you as an artist on Tuesday. Just sort of use what you have there. Let me just show you one other thing, because we got 10 minutes here to sort of establish this over here. Let's look over here. Oh, something gets, all of a sudden it doesn't look like what I have. There are different setups for the interface. The whole time today, except when I showed you the spreadsheet, I've been in the one called layout, okay? But it is possible to, especially, there's a lot of shortcuts. I've definitely done things where I pressed one, something weird happened, and I was like, uh-oh, I don't know how to get out of this, or I don't even know what I pressed. And so if that happens to you, you can come over here to plus and just simply create a new layout, and that should restore order, right? It should put it back in the view that I've been using all day in case things get real weird, okay? Another great shortcut here, Control Spacebar takes whatever part of the interface your mouse is over and makes that full screen. And so I definitely like using that, especially, I want to stop showing me all this stuff. I just want to see the thing. I do that a lot here to just sort of see that, right? But this is an important one in that it's dependent on where the mouse is. So a bunch of Blender shortcuts function that way, where you have to know the shortcut, but it only works if your mouse is in a specific place, right? So we shouldn't run into too much of that today, but you can definitely run into it. Be aware that that's a thing. Let me show you one other thing that's going to help and provide, I think it communicates the value proposition of learning this software, which, you know, this week probably is going to seem a little dry as you're just getting your feet wet over the weekend, right? You're like, ugh, this seems like a lot of work to like move a bunch of cubes around. We're going to get to cooler stuff, but for right now, in order to understand the layout. But one of the things that we can do is use modifiers. So here's a sphere, right? And we'll add our first modifier, right? So we're going to take one more step up that chain of control, right? We have points, edges, and faces. That's the bottom atomic level. Then we have objects, right? And then above that, we can apply modifiers to objects. And these allow us to, once again, do more procedural, iterative things in the form of instructions while sacrificing perhaps some of the precise control over some of the underlying structures, right? And so we're going up, down, along this continuum. So over here, under modifiers, I'm going to add the array. Because this will, all that work I just did to put those cubes in that format, right? That was, you want to experience that and make sure that you understand how those tools worked. But obviously, if you had to do that a lot, that's a lot of clicking to do that. The array modifier is a way to procedurally create these kind of arrays, right? An array is the computer programming word for multiple things in a group, right? Right. And so how did I get to that? I selected the sphere, and then this is the modifier tab. Up until now today, we've been looking at that's the object one, the object tab. Now I'm looking at the modifier tab. So in add modifier, most of the time when I'm making a new thing in Blender, whether it's a primitive or a modifier, I'm searching the menu. I'm not coming in here and doing like no way. So I'm just looking here. Just a word of warning, there's array and array legacy. We're in Blender 5. This is one of the cool new things in Blender 5 is the new array. And so here we are. And so that added, the modifier goes to the object, right? And so it's like a part of the object now. Anyways, this should be a fun amount of experimentation for you, right? And so now I can take the object and make multiple objects in this arrangement, right? So by default, it's in line, and I can dial up the number of spheres in this line. I can switch from line to circle, and then you see that the controls underneath here, there's a reason this is at the top, because this stuff changes depending on what shape it is, right? When I'm putting things in a line doesn't have a radius. That doesn't make any sense, right? But when I change it to circle, now I have a radius, which I could use to, whoa. I got to get that matrix GIF up here to be able to pull it up, right? To be able to make multiple things. Now, in addition, this array modifier is not only, like, this is obviously applicable to the abstract order project you need to make, right? In that I've ordered a bunch of things in an abstract way. But check this out. Now there's also a randomized parameter, which you can opt into. And so here we could start to, for instance, randomize the scale of these objects in the circle, or offset them along an axis, right? And so this is a significant step up that ladder of control, right? In that now I'm able to make this very, very interesting array of objects. However, what if I needed to move just this one a little bit over? I've kind of sacrificed that control. We'll talk about ways that you can get back to that if you need to do it. But this is the beginning of seeing the matrix here in terms of the level of control, right? In terms of like, if I had to just type all of these points into a spreadsheet to make this shape, like that might be a semester worth of doing, right? In terms of that. But now using the tools allows me to manipulate this in that way. And so, yeah, I'm not going to go through all of these things. This is a very, very new part of Blender. And so I think the design is of a level that is more intuitive than maybe some of the other parts of the program. And so have some fun here in terms of being able to experiment with the different shapes. There's this randomized parameter. They've done a pretty good job of assigning the things. Most everything now has a pop-up instruction, which allows you to go to exactly see what, it gives you a little hint about what's going on. In addition to this, I can right-click on a parameter and go to Online Manual, and it should open up a browser and take me directly to that part of the official Blender documentation. So I know the good part about Blender is that there's a lot of YouTube tutorials. The bad part about Blender is that there's a lot of YouTube tutorials, right? In that there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm sure if you've done this at all, not all of the information is of the same quality, right? And the program changes a lot, right? So the good news is Blender changes a lot. The bad news is Blender changes a lot, right? And so there's a lot of tutorials online that are different versions or older versions, and it's not quite the same information anymore. So when you right-click and go to the manual and go to the official documentation, it's the documentation for this version. And so that would be where I start, right, for finding stuff. I have a problem with something, I wouldn't immediately jam it into YouTube and hope that some random 7th grader across the world has made a 2-second video about how this is supposed to work, right? In many cases, that has happened, right? Some 7th grader has done that, but it's not always the case, which is why I would encourage you, especially for those of you who aren't from a time when the manual was the only way to find anything out, like I would encourage you to look at it, right? And they make it very, very easy. Sound good? Okay, all right. So you're just making 2 Blender files for Tuesday, order and chaos, right? Very, very simple. So you guys will be turning in just blend files for next Tuesday. But the first things are, make sure you take the syllabus acknowledgement quiz ASAP, okay? If you don't take the syllabus acknowledgement quiz by Friday, the institution has to drop you from the class. You can be added back later, but just do it, okay? Take the syllabus acknowledgement quiz. So that way, that's your sign that you have shown up and you are indeed participating in the class. And then get all the technology and introduction done for Friday. And then we'll see each other on Monday, okay? But cool. All right, that's a good start. I'm excited. This is always a fun class. People are always fun. Next week we'll have a little bit more time. I'll show you some stuff that people made last semester, and I probably won't speak quite as many words per minute. All right, awesome. I'll see everybody then. Okay, cool. Oh, Fabio's on the line. Okay, yep, awesome.